Thank you so much for everyone joining us here today. I'd just like to say my name is Srilekha and I am an AMP Elections Fellow. And today joining us is Ms. Kadida Kenner, Center for Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. Today, we hope to talk about political campaigns, the youth, and how you play into the impact of the election. And as we all know, the elections are heavily approaching, and now more than ever, it's vital that we show up for our government because this election has a lot on the line. So I know Ms. Kenner, Kadida, would you like to start by introducing yourself? And I know you have a presentation planned just to enlighten us.
Sure. Good afternoon, Srilekha. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate all of this. The work that you all are doing is amazing. So just really encouraged to be with you this afternoon. So my name is Kadida Kenner. I am Director of Campaigns for the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center in Pennsylvania. I currently reside in Harrisburg, the capital of Pennsylvania, although I've lived in Maryland and New Jersey and North Carolina and other places across the state. But Pennsylvania is home for me. I was born and raised here. And I'm just grateful to be with you. I know that I'm speaking to the youth today, and that is always so exciting for me. I know that folks watching in today are around the ages of 15 to 27-ish. So that's great to hear. I'm going to be able to speak a little bit about how it is that I've come into this work and hopefully inspire some of you to get into this work too. And I do have a little presentation to launch whenever you're ready.
Great, perfect. And personally, I can't wait to see and learn from you because as the youth, we usually don't have an unbiased view or a view of how the adults look at us. And especially from politics, we know next to nothing. So thank you again for being here. And I'm ready whenever you are.
That's great. And don't sell yourself short because you all know a lot. I wish I had as much knowledge as a 16-year-old that you have, Srilekha. I wish I had that knowledge when I was 16. So you're doing amazing work. So I do have a short PowerPoint presentation to show because I know sometimes the visuals are important for the audience to see, and some folks learn better that way too. So I'm going to go ahead and launch my PowerPoint, and we'll get this started. All right. Whew. Sorry. Let's try that again. Went to the end. All right. What's going on here? I'm sorry, everybody. All right, here we go. I'm ready now. All right, so I'm so pleased to be with AMP Global Youth today. I know that you are a youth-led group, community, a network of folks who are looking to amplify the story, voice, and power of the youth vote. And I couldn't be more excited than to join you all today for this quick presentation. And I want you to know that I love the title that you all have chosen, which is The Power of the Youth Vote. A lot of times I know folks will probably join you and do a lot of speaking at you. I don't want to speak at you today. I want to speak with you today. And I want to make sure that you understand that I know how powerful the youth vote will be and is. So let's get started here. So I like to always start any presentation that I'm involved in by quoting someone who has passed away some time now, and that is the great Frederick Douglass, a civil rights icon, abolitionist. And Frederick Douglass said that power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. And that quote went on and on. But because what it is that you all believe as an organization, as AMP Global Youth, I know that you understand the power of power. And so it is so important that you all never concede your power, that you amplify your voices, and that you make sure that your power that you all hold is out there in the universe and it is strong, because power will concede nothing without it. So I like to start off some of my presentations, sometimes just giving you a little background on myself so you know where I'm coming from. And maybe some of you all have the same kind of background that I do as well. And so here I show you a picture of my great-grandfather. And I know a lot of you probably watching today have actually probably met your great-grandparent. Maybe you know you've been held by them. You definitely know their name. You've seen them. You've been involved with them. Well, this is my great-grandfather, just one great. I'm not all that old, but I can tell you that my great-grandfather, Emil Clay, was actually born a slave in Mississippi, in Aberdeen, Mississippi, in the mid-1800s. And so when we talk about a lot of the issues that are impacting us in this country today, we have to talk about the past and how it has put us in the situation that we're in a lot of times. And so I come to you as an advocate for policy change, as an advocate for social change. And I come to you because I know the importance of it, just based upon my family history and knowing that my great-grandfather, who was born a slave, son of his master, eventually was able to go on and become a college graduate and a very successful man. So that tells you that all things can be possible here. So let's move on. I want to talk to you because obviously this is all about the power of the youth vote. Today is what we're talking about and the power that you all have. But you all need to know what's at stake. And I'm sure you already know because you are living this. But your civil and human rights are at stake, not only in this election, but all elections. And even when we're not in the midst of elections, all of our rights are at stake. And so it's so important that we advocate for ourselves and amplify our voices. And so I want to give you some examples. I'm going to give them to you as examples and a lens of the courts, because so much of what we all care about, all the issues that we advocate for and believe in, eventually come down to the federal courts, and the federal courts will determine whether or not something is constitutional and determine whether or not it's something that's we'll have to live with here in this country. And so first I'll start off with the ACA. So this is important to a lot of you who are watching us in the youth community because of the ACA, a lot of you are able to stay on your parents' health insurance up until the age of 26 years old because of the ACA. And if the ACA were to be overturned, a lot of you would find yourselves without health insurance, and that's very dangerous. And so it's very important that when you think about the issues that's impactful to you, you have to express yourselves, you have to amplify your voices. This is a burden on you financially as someone who will be 22 coming out of college. That is just too much, along with your student loans and things. So making sure that we can protect things that are good for the youth, it's very important. Another one here is some of you may have interest in birth control or protection of your rights, your reproductive rights, your reproductive justice rights. And so these kind of situations these issues are also heard by the courts. You may care about the fact that we are a country made up of immigrants. And if you care about that community, just know that there are sanctuary cities across this country who are making sure that the immigrant community is safe here in this country. And so there are opportunities where sanctuary cities could actually lose funding if certain laws are passed to ensure that that happens. So if you believe in protecting the immigrants community here in this country, you could be concerned about this as well. And I want to show you an example of the youth, right? So these are some youth in North Carolina. And here they are, as the article states here, colliding, not only with the Constitution here, but the lawmakers in North Carolina, covering their mouths to say that they are free, that they won't be silent, that they don't want their voting rights suppressed. These are college-age students who are making sure that they're amplifying their voices and speaking their power, because it's going to be so important that everyone has the right to vote who is able to vote in this country. And this is a nonpartisan issue. Registering folks to vote is a nonpartisan issue, not about politics. It's making sure that everyone who is able to vote actually can get out there and do so without their votes being suppressed, without being intimidated, and without having lots of discomfort trying to get to the polls. More issues that are impactful to you in the youth community. I know you all care about the environment. I know you care about gas pipelines and what can happen in the future as it relates to environmental justice in this country. I know many of you care about the asylum seekers in this country coming in from different places and legally trying to seek asylum here in this country to ensure that they can also have a better life. All of these things are issues that you can impact when you vote. Here's another example. This is from August of this year, an example of the Tennessee governor who was trying to actually strip away voting rights from students who were actually protesting in the streets. So we want to make sure that we know what our constitutional rights are, and being able to peacefully protest is one of those. And no one should lose their right to vote because they protest. I show you here a picture of Meek Mill. I know I am speaking to the youth today, so I'm trying to make sure I provide some perspective that you all can really relate to. And so many of you probably know who rapper Meek Mill is. Well, rapper Meek Mill had a difficult time with a certain judge who was making it very hard for him to make a living, role for a very long time. And so because of the legal system, we know we have criminal justice reform that needs to be done in this country. But I bet you Meek Mill didn't know, or hopefully he did, that he can actually vote in and out the judges that actually will preside over his cases. Here in Pennsylvania, for example, we vote for our judges in this state. So if you're having issues with the system, you have the opportunity to vote the system, the current system. You have an opportunity to make an impact on that current system. And you can vote these judges in and you can vote these judges out. I want to bring up this issue for a lot of you, which is the fact that we have a very low minimum wage here in this country. We're at $7.25 an hour as a federal level for minimum wage. And that's not a lot of money. That's not a lot of money in any state. Here we are in Pennsylvania, and we have the lowest minimum wage of every state that surrounds us. And a lot of these states have programs in place or laws in place to actually hit the $15 level soon. And here we are in Pennsylvania stuck at $7.25 an hour. So we have to do better to ensure that when you all go to school and you graduate from college, that you may come back to your hometown. But why would I come back to my hometown to work if the wages are so low? I might take my college education and stay someplace outside of my state. And it's a brain drain on our states when our young folks leave the state and take that education with them. So here's an example of what you can do. These are college students at Penn State University, main campus, and they rallied outside of their state legislator's office to let him know that it's time to raise the minimum wage. And it's time to raise the wage because college students cannot afford to work minimum wage jobs and attend college and put food on their tables and pay for housing and pay for books. And sometimes just some fun things like going to the movies when we were able to do that. And so it's so important that you know that you can mobilize your community and have an impact on what elected officials in your state are able to do and what they should do. Here's an example of a rally that was held in Pennsylvania to raise the minimum wage. And you have lots of different advocacy groups there, CASA, SEIU, the labor unions, and others, demanding that Pennsylvania raise the minimum wage. So more examples of what you all can do. So when we talk about the fact that some of you may not be 18 years old yet, and you can't vote to bring about this change, well, you're old enough to rally. You're old enough to attend these events and make your voice heard. And I want to show you this important picture because I know a lot of you who are currently in school, in college, or will be going to college soon, are trying to find ways to afford college. And again, as this is titled The Power of the Youth Vote, you know, it needs to be expressed that I understand where you all are coming from because I'm someone who went back to school later in life and I'm currently in student loan debt, like many of you probably are. And so I know that I can tell you that in 1975, when a lot of our parents or grandparents were in college, they could actually work a minimum wage job. They could work a minimum wage job for 5.5 summers and graduate from college debt free. That doesn't happen today. Today's youth, you all would need to work 18.5 summers at minimum wage in order to graduate from college. And this is just a public college to be debt free. And it's just not possible at this time. I can tell you that my parents, my mom particularly, she bagged groceries at the Giant Eagle grocery store, the Giant Eagle in Pennsylvania. She was able to graduate from Pitt, University of Pittsburgh, debt-free, just from bagging groceries. That doesn't happen today. And so you can bring about that change. You can bring about the change to make sure that college is affordable and that when you graduate, you're not $70,000 into student loan debt and unable to purchase a home or a car. So there's an example here that says that election day, this is an ask of voters in Pennsylvania to vote for their children's future, that their children's future depends on that they need to vote for their children's future. Well, I ask, and I'm sure that all of you also believe, that you can also vote for your future. It's not just your parents who are depending on this or who's being dependent upon to vote, it's you. You can ensure that lawmakers value public schools and prioritize equity in the school funding, because across the country, there are so many places in which not college, but K through 12 education looks differently if you live on one side of the street versus if you live on the other side of the street, or if you live in one very wealthy county versus another county that does not have the same funding. And so because education is such the great equalizer, it's important that we fund public school equally so that everyone has a shot at a great education. And it shouldn't be based upon the zip code in which you were lucky enough to be born into. So again, I speak from a Pennsylvania perspective, but I could tell you that we do not fund education equally here in this state. A lot of that has to do with the fact that it's based upon property taxes. And I'm sure maybe you've heard your parents talking about how high property tax is. Well, it's unfair how the system is working right now for most school students. I'm here in Pennsylvania, we rank 40th out of 50 states for the share of adults that are ages 25 to 64 with a college degree. I kind of spoke earlier to the brain drain. You know, we have Pennsylvanians who will get educated, college educated, high school educated, and they take that education and they leave the state. And so we have that brain drain in some places, and it's all about college and making college affordable. So there are solutions, and I know that you may have questions about, you know, what is it that you can advocate for? How do you talk to your legislators? Even when you're 17 years old or 16 years old, you can still have those conversations. Here in Pennsylvania, we actually have the opportunity to provide college for free to college age students, you know, whose families are making less than $110,000 a year, similar to what they're doing in New York, where you can actually attend college there, statewide colleges, for free. And free shouldn't be a bad word. We should want to make sure that our youth today are educated so that they can go on and make a good living for themselves and their families. So as I close this PowerPoint up, because I'm going to get to any questions you all may have out there, it's important that you vote. And those of you out there who could not vote because you're 16, because you're 17, it's up to you to encourage the people you know in your social circle, your network, to vote. So that's having that sit-down conversation with grandmom or grandfather, or that sit-down conversation with your 19-year-old sibling who hasn't decided whether or not they want to vote in this election. Conversation you're having with your cousins and your neighbors. But you need to let them know that they have to vote for you, especially if you're someone who's not of voting age. They need to vote for you. I want to show you a quick comment made by the late, great John Lewis. Congressman John Lewis passed away earlier this year. You may know who he is, the great civil rights icon. And although I don't always give the reason that you need to vote because ancestors died for your right to vote, or folks, you know, lost blood on bridges, protesting the fact that they don't have the right to vote, it's important that we do acknowledge, you know, our ancestors in this moment and what they've gone through to ensure all of us, every single one of us, have the right to vote. But it's not the only reason. So here's Congressman John Lewis.
My friend, the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. McGovern, for you. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to oppose this rule and to support the previous question. In a democracy, the right to vote is the most powerful non-violent tool we have. Many people marched and protested for the right to vote. Some gave a little blood and others lost their lives. Some of you have heard me say that the right to vote is precious, almost sacred. In my hearts of hearts, I believe that we should make it simple and convenient for all of our citizens to be part of the democratic process. It should not matter whether you're Black or white, Latino, Asian American, or Native American. We should be able to participate in the democratic process. On March 7, 1965, I gave a little blood on the Edmund Pettus Bridge for the right to vote. Before the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was passed, some people had to count the number of bubbles on a bar of soap, the number of jelly beans in a jar. And all across America today, when people go out to attempt to vote, they stand in long, immovable lines. That's not right. It's not fair. And it's not just. We can do better, and we must do better. We have a moral obligation, a mission, and a mandate to empower all of the American people, not just a select few. We must do what is right, what is fair, and what is just. Today, our democracy is under attack by forces within and forces abroad. We need to fix it, and fix it now. A necessary voting system.
All right. So we got to hear there from the great John Lewis, the iconic Congressman John Lewis, about why it's so important that we vote and why everyone vote. This isn't a partisan issue. Again, everyone that has the ability to vote needs to get out there and express their vote. So there are rallies happening across the country beginning the day after the election to make sure that every vote is counted. No matter who it is that you voted for in this election, we want your vote to count. And we want to make sure that the results of the election are also protected. So look out for these events happening across the country beginning the day after the election. This is the one that's happening in Harrisburg that we're organizing with 15 of our partners across the state. So with that, I end the PowerPoint presentation. So thank you for allowing me to do that, Srilekha. And I'm open for any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much for explaining what's at stake on both sides. And you so eloquently explained how the election will change things for a long time, especially for the youth. So now, just for anyone who's joining us, Kadida just powerfully explained the power of the youth vote. And now we've compiled a list of questions that we think the youth are willing to ask. So first question. You briefly worked as a field and digital organizer for the North Carolina Democratic Party. So you have a good idea of the campaign process. Do you think campaigns do a good job of targeting young people, and how could they do better?
Yeah, so I did have the pleasure of being able to work on a campaign in 2016. And prior to that, I also worked on a campaign in 2008 and another one in 2011 for a mayoral contest in Philadelphia. So I do have some experience in working on campaigns, political campaigns, although I can tell you that issue advocacy campaigns are my favorite. I like those more than working on political campaigns. And to answer your question, Srilekha, I don't believe that political campaigns do enough to advocate or activate the youth vote. I think that unless you all can make sure they understand how important your vote is by showing up in numbers, then they won't always, see your vote as being serious. I can tell you as an African-American woman, our vote has not always been taken seriously in this country. And until you can mobilize and turn out in numbers that they can't ignore, they will ignore you. So it's important that you make your voices heard. It's important that you stand outside their offices. It's important that you make phone calls into their offices and you write them emails and you tag them on Twitter, and reach out to them about the issues that are impactful to you. Because if they see you as someone who they're not going to earn your vote, then they will ignore you and ignore your vote. And so you have to make your vote powerful in numbers. You have to turn out in numbers where they can't ignore you.
Thank you so much. With that being said, I'm actually going to skip a question because I think in your PowerPoint, in your presentation, you already beautifully addressed the power of the youth vote and that it in fact does have an impact on the youth. So studies actually show, I've been doing a couple research, that the youth actually fall through on actually going to vote. They have the passion, like you addressed. Almost every single young person has a passion, but they're scared to go vote. So speaking directly to the audience now, why should they get up right now and go vote?
That is a concern. You know, we don't make it very easy for folks to vote here in this country, right? So it's on a Tuesday, right? It's on a Tuesday in November. It's cold outside. Sometimes the weather doesn't cooperate. It's a Tuesday. You're probably in class. And so we don't make it easy for folks to vote here in this country. And so we could begin by making it a national holiday. And there are other states as well that do a great job of making sure that there's early voting so that you don't have to vote on one particular day. You can vote throughout an entire week. There's states that are now finally getting into this mail-in ballots. You know, there's states like Oregon, that's how they vote. That's how they voted for many years now, strictly by mail-in ballots. And so we have to make it easier for folks to vote so that they will vote. And yes, there's probably some nervous energy around this election about getting out to the polls and not feeling safe. I mean, we are in the midst of a global pandemic at this time, right? And I'm sure you've heard on the news and paid attention to this on social media about intimidation factors that are out there and who's going to show up to the polls when you're standing in line. And do you want to stand in line for 3 and 4 hours to vote? Just know that there are helpers out there who are trying to make sure that we're making this as comfortable as possible for all of you who are trying to vote on election day, if you haven't voted already. There are organizations that'll be bringing DJs to the voting lines, so you can stay in line and you know, jam out to what's happening, and keeping you energized with energy bars and things just to try to keep you in line. So, you know, the question that you're asking me is, you know, how is it that, you know, why do the youth need to vote? You need to vote so that we can stop having a voting system such as this, that you need to stand in line for 3 and 4 hours, that you need grassroots organizations to bring along DJs to help you out while you're standing in line for 3 and 4 hours and socially distancing yourselves. You need to vote to bring about the change that is impacting us and what's suppressing our votes. You know, polling locations have been shut down across the country. There's talks in Texas about not accepting votes that were delivered in caravans, right? So there's lots of folks in these higher positions that try their best to suppress our vote. And although there's an argument that says you got to vote because, you know, you have to vote because it's important, because people are trying to take your right away, and if they weren't trying to do that, then that's how you know it's important. Well, yeah, that is one thing. But you have to show up and show out. And this is a day in the life. And we already know life is complicated enough and it's hard enough. But this is the one day in which you can actually speak your truth to power. Your vote is your power. As Congressman John Lewis says, it's almost sacred. Your vote is sacred. And yes, that's the argument that folks have died for all of our rights to vote. And yes, there's that argument that says if it didn't matter, they wouldn't try so hard to take it away from you. But you have to express your power on this one day and before, if you're able, so that folks can take you seriously and they take the issues that you care about seriously as well. I can tell you that legislators, you're the last person they want to see in their office. They do not want to see their constituents show up in their office talking about the issues. They fear you. They fear your emails. They fear your phone calls. They fear you showing up in their district offices to talk about the issues. And when you can get 4 of you to show up in one of these offices and talk about the issues you care about, you can bring about change. But you have to vote your values, and you have to show up on this one day to make sure that your voices are heard.
So now, hopefully, we've convinced everyone that it is indeed important to go out and vote. So now, kind of moving more into like the government side of things, apart from voting, which hopefully the whole audience is doing now, what else can the youth do to impact government and enact real change? I know you talked about the raise the wage in Pennsylvania, but I think most of my peers are so desperate for something to change, but we don't know how to go about that apart from voting and keeping up to date on news. So how do we do that?
Yeah, kind of just what I was talking about is that the vote is important because they want to value, they need to value your vote, especially when it come out in numbers. But the advocacy you can do, even when you're not of voting age, again, showing up at their offices, making the phone calls into their offices, writing the letters, sending fax messages and texts into the offices, all of that is impactful. A lot of times legislators don't know everything, right? So they're human like the rest of us. They don't know all of the issues that are out there. And if you don't bring your issue to the forefront, they're not going to hear it, or they may never hear it. And so what it is that you want to bring about the change, you have to make it happen. You have to show up. You have to be visible. They need to see you. They need to hear you. And I can tell you that's been the most impactful thing in terms of trying to bring good legislation to different states. I mean, here I speak of what's happening here in Pennsylvania, but the minimum wage is $7.25 federally. That's across the entire country, unless states have actually raised the minimum wage on their end. And so that's an issue that's impactful because, you know, money moves everything around us, unfortunately, right? And it can be the root of all evil. But it's important that folks can have enough money to put, you know, food on the tables, clothe their children, and provide them with a great education. And that's what we all want. That's what we all want, whether we're Black, white, brown, rich or poor, we live in suburbs or rural areas or the cities. We want to make sure that we are able to provide for our children and live a peaceful life. Just live a peaceful life.
So then kind of to close it off, if you had one thing to say to our audience, or more specifically the youth, what would it be?
Don't forget grandma, right? Don't forget your older relatives out there. They don't always get to hear from you. And if you're gonna call and call grandma or grandfather or your aunts and uncles, tell them why it's important that they vote for you. You don't have the option to vote as 16 and 17-year-olds. You can't vote, but they can vote on your behalf. If they care about the issues that you care about and you explain to them why it is you care about those issues, you know, you make the PowerPoint presentations and such to show them why they should support a certain candidate or certain issues, then they're going to take that seriously because you've taken the time. I can't tell you how many times I've come across Facebook posts of folks in my age bracket who are gloating about, you know, the PowerPoint presentations that their kids have created, trying to get them to, you know, buy them a new pair of sneakers, or trying to get them to purchase the gaming consoles or whatever. But if you can put together a PowerPoint presentation to explain to your grandmother why it is she needs to vote your values, she's going to take you seriously. So amplify your voices. Encourage those who can vote to vote on your behalf. There are going to be some people who stay home this election, but if you can encourage just one more person to vote, it's important. So amplify your voices by encouraging those who can vote to vote on your behalf and vote for the values that you're telling them that you value. So important. So yeah, talk to your family, talk to your social network, and make sure everybody goes out and they vote while they still can here in this country.
Thank you so much for being here today, Kadida. Your perspective on politics, and more importantly, the youth and what impact we can have. And generally, we just have to get up. One day, we just have to get up and go vote and change our democracy. And that's something I hope that resonates with the audience back at home. Again, thank you so much. And we hope you, the audience at home, are going to go vote on November 3rd, or go early vote or mail-in ballot. Thank you so much.